Good morning.
Morning. Chag Sameach.
I'm going to focus my brief remarks on my mother. Her name was Wanda, and she died last year at the age of 95. She died really at the zenith of COVID, although she did not die of COVID. She had cancer. And my mother was a wonderful woman and very interesting in many ways. She was very bright. She was going to go to Wellesley as a child. That's where her mother wanted her to go. She was very close to her father, and her father was a businessman. And as my mother told the story later, she said, "I don't think I'm going to learn anything useful in the liberal arts. I want to be in business." And this was in the 40s. So her father said, "Well, then find a business school." So she went to Simmons. She graduated magna cum laude. She was fluent in 3 languages. She was president of her class. She had a great sense of humor. She was a very generous woman, and she was so good to everyone she met. When I was a child, I always had a job. And my mother would always take a piece of the action. I had a paper route when I was 11, and I remember the first time the issue came up. She said, "How much did you make this week?" And I'm sure it was $1. And she said, "Well, you owe me 20 cents. And I was a kid. I mean, when you're a kid, everything's free. What are you talking about? And she said, "You're eating, you're living, you have a good life, and you have to pay something." So I paid her. And every week, as time went on and I began to make a little more money, she would take more money from me. I went to college and I came home, got a somewhat decent job, and continued to live at home through part of my 20s. And she'd continue to sit me down and the same question, "How much did you make this week?" One time I said, "Mom, it's like living with the mob. I can't hide. You know where I live. You know I've got money, and we both know you're going to get a piece of it." To which she said, "Very funny. I'll pay up." Later in life, when I married, on my wedding day, my mother handed me an envelope. She had invested every penny I gave her since the age of 11. And she was a good business person, and she did well. Every penny I gave her, she invested and handed it all to me. That's the type of woman she was. Well, she would occasionally get sick in her later years. My father died when she was in her late 80s, and she'd go to the hospital for various issues. Now, when she'd go to the hospital, my brother and I would be on the scene, and we would infiltrate the operation. We'd get to know who the shift supervisors are. We'd find out who the nurses on duty would be. If the nurses station didn't have enough soda, we made sure they got it. If they liked pizza at night, we made sure they got pizza. We always had somebody in the room with her, even if we took vacation time. Now, did that mean she got better medical care? Who knows? We like to think it was true, but probably not. But what it did do was it let our mother know she was never forgotten. Never once did we want her to feel, lying in a hospital bed, that she was forgotten, because she wasn't. One day she said to my brother and I, "Why do you boys make such a fuss?" After we had reviewed with her what we were doing and what we had provided. And my brother said, "That's what you get for being a good mother." And she smiled. Well, she was hospitalized during COVID. And this is a sad part of the story, but it doesn't last long. We couldn't go to see her. We couldn't provide the usual gratuities we provided. We couldn't do anything. And it was chaos back then. Some nurses would say you can FaceTime. Other nurses would say she's not even allowed to use the phone. At one point, there was a coding error. She was dying of cancer and they couldn't give her morphine because she was coded no narcotics for some bizarre reason. It took us to data fix it. And we realized that my mother was going to be treated as she was, a dying old woman, and attention was properly being given to those who could perhaps be saved. And it was hard. It was very hard to be able to do nothing because I do not handle inaction well. At times I would drive to the hospital and just walk around on the sidewalk. And I didn't pray for my mother to get better because I knew she wasn't going to get better. I just constantly prayed that she not feel forgotten. That even though she is alone and at times delirious, that she never feels that she is an old woman in a hospital bed alone. And of course, I don't know how she felt. So after she died, it became time to mourn. Well, I'm a convert to Judaism, and anybody that heard my Hebrew 10 minutes ago already knows that. And so I learned things like Kaddish late in life. Most of you heard the words from childhood. So my brain in learning was old. So I learned it from a different perspective in life. And what struck me is nobody dies. There's no death mentioned. There's no mourning referred to. It seemed to be terribly misnamed. I didn't question it. Well, this is the beautiful thing I learned as a convert. And, by the way, I digress. People think that I converted because I married a Jew. But long before I met my beautiful wife, Ellen, it's something I had studied and contemplated. I sometimes think my soul was waiting to meet Rabbi Lerner because he was so helpful to me. In any event, now, I said Kaddish for the first time as a mourner. And I immediately understood why it is for mourning. Because for me, I felt an almost tangible feeling, a reminder that God has not forgotten me. Those words that I would speak, in my mind, were an expression of my connection with God. And God not forgetting me. And of course, my not forgetting him. And it helped me also deal with the tremendous, tremendous horror that I felt that my mother felt neglected. And I understood better why we say Kaddish for those who died. And I felt, and it helped me to remember that God did not forget my mother. And that I believe she did not die feeling neglected. And I will tell you that reciting Kaddish helped to focus my mind spiritually so that intellectually I was able to grasp it and deal with it perhaps better. And that's my story.
Mr. Koch.